Well, that did not go how I thought it would, Gary. Michigan State honestly controlled the whole game. The Huskers made it close at the end. That's my first wrong prediction all season, but I've still got a cop to it. You thought we were going to win as well. I wasn't alone. I think a lot of Husker fans thought we were going to beat Michigan State. They were on a 6-game losing streak. Hit the like for us, guys, and tell us in the comments, did you expect what you saw? Or if you're like us, do you think that the Huskers just flat out beat themselves? Gary, I think I know where you fall on this, but I feel like I have to ask the question. Have the Huskers gotten anywhere near the point where they need to get some sort of look at Chubba Purdy? And the only reason I'm asking is because the turnovers have been bad from Harburg, and the throwing game is hit or miss, and it's mostly miss.
I feel like at this stage in the season, the reason you would do that is because from a coaching standpoint is you're really putting an emphasis on turnovers aren't going to be tolerated. And there's obviously a different tolerance level depending on the position, because the quarterbacks seem to get away with a little bit more, but it makes sense that, you're never going to have 0 turnovers through a whole season. But quarterback touching the ball every single play, the likelihood he's going to have 1 or 2 pretty high. You have to understand the difference between, from position to position. But at this point, it's not just the turnovers. I feel like he's regressed from when he first came in those first couple games where he started doing his thing. The second reason, and the reason I think a lot of fans are going to want to, is it's an emotional reaction to being upset with Harburg, right? But taking a guy who hasn't played at all this year, except for, didn't he take like a snap or 2 against Colorado, something like that? And now when you really need a game out of these last, 3 to get to a bowl game, you can still salvage a little more, work your way up in the tier bowl game if you can get a couple wins. Having him come out in his first real playing time this year, being the back end of a season, not having reps, like I said, probably not getting a ton of first or second string work in practices, you basically are going to give a guy who's been on the sidelines for over a year a 1-week period to get ready to go play the tougher games on your schedule to close out the season. So I don't know that you're doing him or your team any favors at that point. I think if he had such a better passing ability than either one of the 2 we've seen, he would have already been in at some point. Because I don't think anyone believes that although he can run the ball, that he's going to run the ball at the same tier that Jeff Sims and Heinrich Haarberg can. So you're kind of stuck with what you've got. You know what I mean? It's just, it really shines a light on how close Nebraska is to really turning the corner to the point where, like I'm always saying, like, relax, we are what we are. This is the very beginning of a process, and you're seeing improvement without studs at the key positions you need studs, right? So you just kind of have to keep things into perspective, and it's not super exciting. It's not a lot of fun when you see games like this, but this game we just watched, we didn't lose like when Michigan beat them, right? Like that was, you're clearly playing a better program with better talent, and it didn't matter what you did, you weren't going to win. This felt like the exact opposite of that in terms of losses, where there's a lot of things that a lot of positions and players and even coaches could have done better, that hopefully you learn from that, because we've seen Nebraska play better. We've seen Nebraska not play great games and play better than that one. So you know that it's a possibility. You just hope that you figure out what buttons to push, what kind of things to work on practice, kind of like after the Michigan game where he did the Sunday night practice, and then that seemed to really like flip things. Maybe it wasn't that, but I mean, there's been a lot of talk about it, things like that. So if you can get something out of this loss, I'm not saying like moral victory type stuff, but if you can get something out of this loss to kind of help catapult you into these last 3 games, changing the most important position on the field going into that, I don't think is a plus. Now, like, again, if we had a guy who was out because of injury, but he's clearly better, then yeah, it makes things different. But I just don't think it does anybody any favors to try and get a guy going, started, and need him to gel and mesh with the offense and things like that at the most critical position, and then go finish out the season for us and make sure we don't lose this shot we have of going to a bowl game.
I'm not done with Harburg. I don't feel like I need him replaced necessarily, but I do feel like maybe I'm ready for basically what Michigan did today. We didn't even face the quarterback that we thought we were going to face. We faced 2 or 3 other quarterbacks. They mixed and matched. They brought in one quarterback who's better at one skill set and then brought in the other quarterback for another skill set when they needed it. I wouldn't mind seeing Purdy get a snap here or there. I definitely think I'm done with Jeff Sims after all of those turnovers. But Purdy really hasn't gotten a chance, and I think a lot of Husker fans see him as technically a better passer. I'm desperate, and I'm willing to try anything to get into a bowl game at the end of the year.
When you're talking about Michigan State alternating quarterbacks and doing their thing, they've been doing that throughout the year. They didn't roll out a guy who did one or two handoffs or kneeled on the ball or something all year and has just been standing on the sidelines and not taking first team reps in practice, right? And you have a team that they came in with 2 wins, something like that. Now they've got 3. Their season's over as far as what's going to happen. A lot of those guys are going to transfer out. Most of the coaching staff's not going to be there. Probably none of the coaching staff's going to be there. It's 2 very different scenarios where they can just pull all the stops and whatever happens almost without consequence at this point. Nebraska still has a lot left on the table, from as simple as a winning season to a bowl game to what tier of a bowl game to, believe it or not, it's a long shot, but on the opposite end of the spectrum, the conference, right? The West, and then you win the West, who knows? So the desperation thing, I don't necessarily agree with, because I feel like I really wish Jeff Sims wouldn't have fumbled when he got in last week. I would have liked to have seen something to make you believe, oh, this is fixed, because he's a hell of an athlete. Seems like a really, really good character and teammate type guy that would be nice to inject into the offense from time to time, or like today at some point, if you could have gone to him to the point you're saying. But we've seen Harburg play better. Like, I feel like he's kind of stopped running with the same determination that he did when he first came in. It's almost like he thinks he needs to be this mobile quarterback, but is like a dart thrower type thing. And he just doesn't have the accuracy, or really the decision making for it. And then you look across the board outside of Harburg at, for whatever reason, fair catching balls inside the 10. The defense, all of a sudden, now they can't make tackles, and the coverage over the top isn't great. They have to hold or get beat, biting on things. The offensive line kind of regressing, not giving him much time, much separation, and a lot of routes with the receivers. Like, there's a lot of things around the entire team that can be adjusted, smaller things that can be adjusted along with him to where you can fix things. I think you are who you are with what you have in terms of quarterback. I think a really good quarterback, or even just a real nice quarterback, would take this team to the next level that everybody's kind of anticipating. But I don't think panicking and throwing wrenches and getting these crazy ideas or gadget plays, or just for like 4 plays we're going to do this, I don't know that that's really going to help. I think if anything, that's going to start hurting you down this back stretch. So like I said, for me at this point, it is what it is. I'd just roll with Harburg. If nothing else, like I've been screaming for, drop back to pass when the field opens up, start running and gouging teams that way. Really stick with the running game, especially when it's working, instead of, okay, we ran 3 plays for 30 some yards, now we're just going to go pass, punt. You know what I mean? So I think there's things all around that can be adjusted without hurting the team, get them back to what they've played like the last few weeks or whatever, and you get a good finish to the end of the season. But changing up the most important position for a guy who hasn't taken any real snaps, I don't think is a good idea at all. I think it's a bad, short-sighted, knee-jerk reaction, in my opinion.
Well, tell us what you guys think in the comments. We will have a preview for Maryland coming out soon this week. Be ready for that. Until then, go Big Red.